Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of the World of Brickfilms podcast. I am your host, William of IW Studios. Raphael is not actually able to join with us today, so standing in for him is Sean Willets of Sillypenta.
Hello.
Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back so soon.
Our special guest today is Chris Boyer of SlothPaladin. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Having some coffee.
So you've been brick filming since around 2000, is that right?
I think 2002 is when I started.
Right.
So that's over 10 years. Over 15 maybe? I don't know. Maths.
By now, yeah.
How were you introduced to brick filming?
Well, I hadn't ever heard of it before. It was, pre-YouTube. And I had always liked Lego, but I had moved to a new town and I met this guy because he saw I was reading a Star Wars book, and he's like, "Hey, you want to hang out? You like Star Wars books? I like Star Wars books." And he introduced me to this other friend. There was this film festival thing for high schoolers, and he's like, "Hey, I know this guy who's making a Lego movie that makes fun of Star Trek. Maybe we can help him make that for this festival." And we kind of joined up. And, we had never done, or I had never done stop motion before, and I'd never done a Lego film, and I'd never really seen any. But we started doing that, and I kind of took over the story. We didn't continue his Star Trek film, but that's how I got started. And I made a lot of films. That was with Brian Bridges. I made most of my early films with him. So
how did you sort of come across the brickfilms.com community?
We found it after we had finished our first movie and we were starting on our second one. So it was a bit later. We just we stumbled across it and was like, "Hey, other people make Lego movies." And, we kind of like, "Oh man, they make Lego movies. Maybe they'll like to watch our Lego movie." And at the festival thing, it was all like local people, and it was kind of a big deal to make movies back then because anyone who had a camera, it was like most people didn't have cameras at all. And so everyone seeing an animated film in there, it was like super impressive to the, other high schoolers. But when we showed our video to it was brickfilms.com. Yeah. Nobody was impressed because it was terrible. So, but we were making a sequel, at that time, and I think it had been a few years since we made the first one.
That would have been 2004, is that right?
Yeah, 2004 sounds right. So that's when I found. So it was like 2 years after the first Lego movie that we made, which was Attack of the Legos. I don't know if I said that, but I think we were actually looking for ways to get better. So it was kind of a cool little thing to find. But also, we had been discovering, like previously, all the Lego films we had watched were like at lego.com because they had that Lego set, the animation set. And we saw stuff like the Monty Python Lego thing and like, well, we can't do that. It's, professional. We're never going to do stuff like that. But it was pretty interesting to meet a community of people, and we started realizing that we could improve what we did. And I think our films got shorter and shorter, but they got better and better.
Yeah. So what is your kind of step-by-step process when making a film? When it comes to like the planning, like writing and storyboarding and that kind of stuff?
Well, lately I've been doing mostly work for other people, so I haven't been doing a lot of writing. My writing is questionable at best. The last script I wrote, which I really liked, it was my best script ever. I wrote after I finished Beyond the 11th Dimension. I wrote a script for this chicken movie. It doesn't have a title, but I just sat down one night and pounded out a script in 45 minutes. And I don't think that I'm very good at writing. And I don't usually do some detailed storyboards, but I've been kind of changing my approach for like animation and planning and stuff like that over the years. That, like, it used to be, we just sat down and we're like, well, let's try to make sure that you can't see the room on camera, which would involve just putting up walls until, that's how things started. But nowadays it's like I like to build sets in front of the camera. Like, I have a really good idea of like what lens I'm going to be using. Like, I have a very particular like kind of shot idea in my mind, and I kind of know what lens I want to capture that kind of shot, and I will end up building the sets around like how that lens is going to be positioned on frame. So that's kind of my build process is very focused on how it's going to look in the final film. So I don't have very clear plans for like sets themselves. I just want to make sure that it looks right on camera. So like at any time, like I sometimes like will build sets just, by myself, or, like away from a camera or something. And anytime I do that, it's like that requires huge changes. I'm like, oh, none of this works at all. So that's kind of how I approach the initial like design of something. And then animation, I've actually started to occasionally record live action reference for some of my animation stuff, even for some Lego stuff, which is something I've learned. I've been going to school and learning character animation with CGI and Maya, but I've actually done some shots where I've recorded myself doing live action reference and translating that into Lego, and I think it helps make the animation way better. So there's no finished project I've done that's kind of shows that off, though.
Yeah, I was hoping to ask about the chicken film, because I remember all the animation tests and the some of the pictures of the sets, and it was looking really promising. So I was just wondering, is it still on the horizon, or is it on the back burner at this stage?
Well, I still have the sets. Right now, I am taking care of my grandpa full time and going to school full time, and it's like a lot of kind of work to do those things. So I might be taking a break from school, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to work on the chicken film or not. I do think it's the best script I've written. I don't know if I've let a bunch of people read it, but it's one of those things. It's like, I don't know. Like, I would like to finish it one day, but it's really hard to say. Like, my last film took me like 4 years to make, and there was a bunch of breaks in it. So this one does not seem to be any different. I had hoped when I wrote the script, I'm like, oh, I'll make a really simple script, and I guess the better I get at animation, the harder everything becomes.
Unfortunately, that's always the way with improving.
Well, I feel like when you start, like, the less you know about making movies, the easier they are to make. And right now it's like I want like a crew of like 5 people to make this 1-minute film or something, It's like I could use like a crew at this point, and like the more specialized you become, I feel like the more you want every area of your film to have a specialist involved, and it just becomes really hard to just work on projects by yourself.
Yeah, I agree, because I made a film with an original soundtrack, and I had Blue Ghost doing the soundtrack, so I could never have made anything as good myself, and now I couldn't imagine going back to trying to do every role. It feels like if you had one guy doing each different thing, you could make such a better project.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I find like the more you hone your skills, and the more you kind of learn, when you're animating, the longer it takes to even do the simplest things, like, walk cycles and that kind of thing, just normal animation. I think I find that like now it's like I spend so much more time doing the small things that would have taken me like, half an hour, which now take me like a full like 2 hours, And it's all about, because you want it to look the best you can, and yeah, it's each time you learn more, it does take longer.
Yeah. I remember trying to remember the names of these filmmakers. There's somebody that does a bunch of tests that have like extremely crude like camera work and stuff, but I just love the way the animation works, and it's almost like I wish I could, be like directing their animation. It's like Just Kidding, or
Is that Mr. Mingle?
yeah, Mr. Mingle. Yeah, that's who it is. And it's just like I just love like the animation they got, and like they brought their animation to such a high level. But like if they were working with somebody else, like another director and a camera operator or something, and like they were working with somebody's script, they would bring so much life to the animation side of things. And it's like you almost don't want that person to waste time getting good at camera and writing and stuff like that, because the animation is just like that's clearly what they're interested in focusing on, and focusing anywhere else for them it seems like a waste of time almost.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea if Mr. Mingle could join up with somebody else who's more into setting up the shots, because as far as I know, he's never actually made a film, only animation tests, and the animation is truly next level stuff.
Yeah, it's like, and that's how you, like, when you go out and do like animation work, that's kind of how you work. Because I guess the problem with learning stop motion is there's so many aspects. It's like, I don't know if you've ever gone and looked at the 11-second club online. They post a 11-second like dialogue clip, and people animate it, and there's a winner every month or something. It's a pretty cool thing. Mostly it's CGI stuff, but you can submit any kind of animation. There's been stop motion. I've seen some Lego stuff. The Lego stuff usually doesn't do very well, because there's even CGI like professionals competing in this stuff. But there's a focus on animation, and you're not worried about like recording the dialogue. I feel like I lost my train of thought there, but there's people focus on these like animation aspects, but when you post a stop motion though, people will comment on the lighting, like CGI lighting and CGI for like test animation doesn't matter, because it's just like you play blast it, you don't even need to add lights to your scene. But if your lighting is messed up in an amateur stop motion, that's the first thing people point out. And so it's like you have to learn, because like a lot of people I feel like can't watch Mr. Mingle stuff because they're like, oh, like there's wires everywhere in the shot and the lighting is like flickery, and there's like this barrier of entry. You can't just focus on animation. Most people can't in stop motion. You have to have a base set of skills before you start to focus on anything, before people will like even watch your work, which is kind of sad. But
Yeah.
it's like a disadvantage.
Well, see, I think it's got one of the things I noticed, like with stop motion films, especially like Brickfilms and stuff. When you've got one person doing everything, people start to notice technical aspects which they never even think about when it comes to live action stuff that's done by a professional team. Like, whenever I watch something and people say, "Oh, the editing in this film is not done very well," I can never really notice that, but you notice it in like brick films and things like that, because it is done by one person. It's not done by this massive team. Like with live action blockbusters, you expect like things to be edited well. You expect the lighting to be professionally done, because you've got teams of thousands of people working on this. Whereas like with a stop motion film, you've got quite often just one person working and having to do all these things. So it's a really different kind of thing. I think like I learned a lot about how to look at technical aspects critically from watching brick films in ways that I would never have even sort of noticed in live action work, I think.
Well, I feel like the problems that individual filmmakers have stand out more because they have to learn so many things, so it's more obvious, because we've seen good live action films, but you can see a lot of that. Like if you go out and you watch B movies, you can also like, it's like, well, what is bad acting? Like, if you don't really pay attention to acting and you just go watch most films, most films have some kind of level of acceptable acting. Then you go watch a B movie and you're like, okay, so this is when somebody has no training on the acting and what it can do to the film. Or, oh, this is what happens when a director doesn't know how to direct his film, and you kind of can start experiencing these things. And, being part of like, Brickfilms is just largely like another kind of indie film thing. And so there's a lot of people still learning all those things. And you'll see those problems just like you would in more amateur live action. Because, I feel like a lot of people who watch Brickfilms, they don't watch other amateur movie type productions. So it might be less obvious, and they're like, why are these bad? And it's or these aspects bad about a lot of these films. And it's like, well, have you watched a bunch of like superhero fan films or various things, and you'll find a lot of the same mistakes that brick filmers are making in those other projects as well.
Yeah, well, I think that's definitely something I've got to really look into more, like watching like actual films that are considered bad films, because usually I only really watch films that when I talk about like live action films, I only really watch films that I like the look of. If I don't like the look of something, I won't usually watch it. But I kind of do feel like if I want to look at film more critically, I do kind of have to look at why a film is bad. What makes it bad? What could have been done to make it better? That kind of thing. And I think if you gradually watch more and more films, you start to pick up on certain aspects.
Yeah, it's like some of my inspiration was like bad films, which I think is really obvious if you've watched my movies. Is like Plan 9 from Outer Space was like a huge influence on me. And there's various stuff that is direct homage to that in multiple films. But I don't know, there was something like there's this kind of like there's those bad films that people kind of make bad on purpose, like Sharknado and whatnot, or Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus. And then there's like bad films that somewhere on that someone on that project thought that it was a good movie. And it's kind of obvious that not everybody thinks it, because sometimes you can see the actors, they're like bored or like they don't understand what they're doing, but you can kind of feel like there's this passion that just doesn't understand the problems of the movie behind the scenes. And to me that was pretty interesting. I don't know, it really kind of sparked an interest, like watching like these bad movies kind of sparked an interest in filmmaking for me.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, I do think that. I mean, like, because a film that like a really bad film like that, it's quite rare for a bad film to be kind of done. It'd be interesting because these sort of like so bad it's good films, they can't be made intentionally. It's only really interesting when the director or the people working on it think it actually, there's a part of them actually thinks it's a good film. A prime example of that is probably Birdemic. I don't know if you've seen that, where they really do think there's a part of them that really do think they're making a good film, and then they made a sequel, Birdemic 2, a couple of years later, and you can really tell that they knew that people liked it ironically, and it was so much less interesting.
Now it's inauthentic.
Yeah, because they're making it bad on purpose rather than trying to make a good film.
Well, that was kind of one of the things that I learned, because in my it's like, well, I'm just kind of copying bad movies, and so it's okay if it's bad, but I've kind of learned that you have to hold your films, like especially if you're making like weird bad B movies, you have to like really push for excellence, which is kind of like, maybe where I got, there's a lot of problems with Beyond the 11th Dimension, but it's essentially just a really cheesy B movie. But like I had to push for excellence in every area I could to make it worth watching. Because if I didn't like believe in the film, even though it's a really stupid kind of movie, like I don't think it would work at all. And hopefully you can see that I was trying to push for like excellence in lighting and excellence in various aspects of that. But because that is kind of what I've been doing, is I've been making B movie homages, almost exclusively, it seems like.
I mean, it'd be very easy to kind of like make things look crude and crudely animated, crudely, like light it and stuff, and just think, oh yeah, it doesn't matter because I'm just making a B movie. But what you did with the 11th Dimension is, the Beyond 11th Dimension, is that you made it look professional. You made it look, all the aspects of it look so good, and everything was done in such a professional way that it works. It's like it's a really well made film, and that's why it succeeds. Yeah.
Although I still kind of enjoy watching, what is it? Annie Franken Brix by, who was that? MovieFilms, which was like the Weird Ears copy. And I'm not exactly, I didn't pre-watch that or anything prior to this. I didn't expect to mention that, but like sometimes people like succeed in capturing certain moods, and I feel like that, like the capture of amateur filmmaking style, and I don't know why it's so amusing. I feel like maybe if I didn't know and have seen so many like bad brick films, I wouldn't find it funny. Like I don't think I would just recommend it to a stranger to the medium. It's one of those, I don't know.
Yeah, you have to know the story behind it a bit. But I do agree that Anne Franken Brix is a great example where it knows that it's not good, but at the same time, it's genuine. Like it's genuinely funny. I'm not sure how to describe it exactly what I'm saying, but it's not amused with itself just because it's bad. There's more to it than that.
Yeah.
But actually, that's a good topic. Actually, is are there any other brick films any other B movie brick films or kind of quirky brick films that inspired you or that caught your eye after you were making your own?
I want to say like one of the biggest things that kind of impacted me afterwards, I don't know if it was a B movie brick film, was like the stuff Oblong was doing. I really liked, like, he had this short Twisted, which was like I think it's based on some movie I haven't seen that everybody's seen.
It's an intro to a Twisted Sister music video.
Yeah. But I really like was inspired by how he did the sets, and I felt like that was like the first time I looked at a Lego set and I'm like, that's not a wall in front of a camera. That looks like a little world, And he also created like these pillars on the wall, but they curved up so it like felt like there was an actual ceiling. And that is something that still kind of affects the way I build sets today. Is I have this kind of contradictory set of rules for set building. I want, when I'm inside a building, I always want stuff to go inward towards the center of the ceiling, like pillars. I want them to curve inwards so that you kind of get a sense that like they're supporting the weight of the building above them. But outwards, I always like my buildings to go like out from the ground, like, one of those European towns where the alleyway, it's bigger, there's more space at the bottom of the alley than at the top of the alley. Like it gets closer and closer together, like the buildings overhang the street. Like I always like the buildings to kind of overhang everything on the exteriors, but on the interiors I want the buildings to go the opposite way. So it's like if you looked at a cutaway of a set I designed, it would have this giant V-shaped walls that get thicker the higher you go. So not very practical, but I don't know. Visually, it kind of works. And there's kind of that reason. I just want to kind of create this world that feels populated by stuff. I don't want to create something that looks like a set.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I find really impressive about Beyond the 11th Dimension is like the city scene where you've got like the micro scale city, and it looks so vibrant. It looks so kind of like alive and real, and then you see it like close up with all the pedestrians and the big scale buildings, and it all looks really kind of like it's alive and people actually live there. And I really find that really kind of impressive, really. The set design, especially that kind of thing.
That was definitely the most technically impressive Lego animation thing I ever did, which was so much work. I don't know if I'll ever do something again like that in Lego. There was something like 15 or 16 minifigures, and I animated everybody in 3 passes. I'm not sure if that was the best plan or not. So I did 3 different sets of, I animated like 5 minifigs at a time because I just couldn't handle 15, you know. And then I stitched them all together in After Effects. And the special effects work, I think, was so much harder than the actual animation itself. I think I spent a week on that 5-second shot of just digitally stitching the 3 takes together, and it was such a pain. But yeah, no, I really wanted to create a world for that movie. And that's something like minimum, I always try to have a window that has an outside, which I have lit, and I have something so you can see out of a window, and you see, you know, the outside has its own lighting, and it's a prop, even if it's just a tree or something. I just want it to look like past that wall there's something more. And occasionally I want to like show you, you know, which I guess is also something I tried to do in the Thack film that I didn't finish for Thack, the Subterranean, that's what I'm calling it now. So
yes.
I just want, like, I want these particular scenes, and I want the world to feel very expansive and go on forever. It's my
I really admired that, because I always feel like it's so distracting when you see in a film, and it can even be the case in like live action films, when you see like a chase scene, or see a big scene that's set in a city, and everywhere is just like dead. There's no cars, there's no people. The only things that seem to exist are the things that are relevant to the plot, and you know, it really doesn't. It really just makes it a movie set. It doesn't make it a place where people live. It's not a city where other things are going on. And I really do appreciate that. You know, adding that detail to make something look like, you know, there's something beyond what you see. I find that really interesting, and I think it's a really good to add that detail.
Yeah, the thing about that movie was I was really trying to kind of capture. I had just watched Akira again, which I just like. I feel like if you watch Akira, I don't know if you've seen it, but the city feels so huge and so alive in that movie. Like I think it's just one of like the best examples of like a city that just feels insanely alive. Another good example on that front, like where a city just feels alive, is like the Ghost in the Shell movie. And I just feel like you don't see that a lot in Lego. You don't see like these huge places captured or seem like believable. Like I know I've seen a ton of Lego films, especially back, I want to say in like the mid 2000s, when CG became more accessible. There would be people who would have these CGI extension sets, and I feel like it would just be tons of the exact same boring looking house, and you'd have a neighborhood full of, you know, 27 same houses or something, and it looked so dead to me. So
Yeah.
Yeah, the CG set extensions, they really represent a moment in time in brick filming. Nobody does that anymore, it seems. But actually, I have noticed that in your films you tend towards the huge sets a lot more than most people. And really the city scene in Beyond the 11th Dimension, it kind of reminded me of, it was like a full realization of the, like, I don't know, are they cardboard buildings in True Love Waits and the Turkey film?
They are. They're made out of cardboard and little pieces of wood. Because I wanted the city to be big, and honestly, I'd rather have cardboard buildings than the. I can't. I've seen people render Lego well, and I have no problem with CGI set extensions if they look good. But I don't know if I've ever seen a good CGI set extension in a Lego film. What works really well for me is I'll take multiple pictures of stuff and I will composite in multiple copies of things. or backgrounds, because I would prefer to make a miniature set and do forced perspective, which is kind of what I did with I wanted an establishing shot of the city, because I don't feel like the city wouldn't feel huge if you didn't have that opening establishing shot of the miniature scale city. Like, it would, like, even though like that set was absurdly huge, it's like 4 feet across, so that's, it's like 1.3 meters, and so it's like this ridiculously huge set that's like, larger than a small child. But I still feel like it wouldn't work if you didn't have an establishing shot of the city in the beginning. And the only way to do that, of course, I thought, was to make a miniature version of it. And so you establish, here's a city. Okay, here's 3 buildings. There's only 3 buildings in that shot. So, 3 buildings doesn't really make a city. But if you've just cut away from this, establishing shot that has, I think it has like 12 buildings or something. Like, there's not actually that much. It's all lies. Like, everything I do is just pure fraud, which is kind of what I like about animation.
I think like establishing shots are so important. It really, well, it shows you like, you're here now. Instead of like, if you just cut to just the city, like you take away that establishing shot in Beyond the Seventh Dimension, just head straight to the city, it would lose a lot of that kind of feel that this is a real place. It's just such an important part of it. I mean, I got to be honest, I did actually sort of steal. I don't know if I say sort of. Like, I have taken a lot of inspiration from that establishing shot in the very first shot of my next film. There's a shot and it's set in the city, and you've got like that shot of like a couple of skyscrapers. Yeah, so yeah, I definitely took inspiration from that. Yeah.
I guess there aren't enough establishing shots in Brickfilms because people, they don't want to make an effective set for just a couple of seconds of footage.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest problems with my Beyond the 11th Dimension is there was something like 12 sets, which is a ton of sets for a 6-minute movie. Like, that's 2 sets a minute. And, when I wrote my script for my next movie, my chicken project, I was thinking, oh, this has 2 sets, because it takes place in 2 interior shots. And, now that I'm looking at it, I realize, oh, there's no way I can shoot this without an establishing shot. So I need a shot of a neighborhood, and I need a shot that establishes this. And it's just like, I feel like I need these shots, which is just, this additional problem of time. And it's like this thing, the script I wrote that I hoped would be simple, I feel like to tell the best story, I need to like double the amount of sets it has. And I feel like a lot of people making their films, they want to do that one simple, like they just want to make a room set and have their film take place in that room. And that kind of goes back to the era where everything was inspired by Blunty, and it was just 2 guys in a couch on a room, which is not my favorite genre.
That's basically all I've been doing for 11 years.
I do like that you got some Skeleton, the Jerry, and
in Parallel Panic I did have more sets. Yeah, the most recent one.
I don't know if I've seen all of those. I do remember watching some of them, and there's like a lot more visual comedy, because I feel like that's something I haven't watched a lot of Brickfilms lately, so I've been very focused on studying like full body mechanics and stuff with CGI characters. But like a lot of my, like, I want stuff to be like snappier and funnier, and kind of what I'm looking for when I'm looking to enjoy a brick film is I'm looking for like really fun, snappy, like kind of visual humor. Like, I don't even really care about scripts. Like, I want the film to look fun to watch, Yes. And so that's like one of my...
I think that's one of the things I really like about Benny and Lee Penta, is like that whole like there's a lot of visual stuff that kind of reoccurring in the series, like that explosion, and they just keep the stain there for years and years and don't bother cleaning it. And I like that bit, the side, that bit of wall next to the door, which always seems to get always seems to get like destroyed, and they sort of every time they fix it, it just breaks apart again. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just love that kind of.
But yeah, I mean, most for years it was all basic animation, but then in recent years I have been doing a lot more snappy animation and visual gags and props, all that sort of thing.
And I think I've seen some of that era of Benny and Lee films, which I really enjoyed. Like I remember, I think you made one for a THAC. Was it the same year that I made the cyberpunk film?
Yeah, I think so, because you have a brief appearance in that film.
Oh yeah, I remember that. And so that was like one of my favorite films of that contest, actually, which those kind of two guys in a room makes a lot of sense for the THAC style film. Like, I feel like the kind of films I want to make, I keep telling myself, oh, I'll do another THAC film, but I think it would turn into just another Subterranean where I have a film idea that's way too ambitious and then I just can't make it in 24 hours and I'm getting older and I can't do all-nighters as well as I could, 10 years ago. And it's just like, there's not enough coffee and just not enough focus to pull off a THAC film, which I've always struggled with that, I guess, because, even I can't even, True Love Waits. Yeah. Another film with a terrible name, but that film, I don't know if you guys saw the original cut that was released for THAC, but it was half as long. Of course you have, Penta. You're probably archiving all this stuff.
I think I reunited you with the original cut a while back.
Yeah, you did. I remember that. Because I just kind of wanted to see, because it doesn't make any sense. Like, and the thing is, like, the ideas that we had for that film, it's just, there was no way we were going to get them done in one night. And that was two people working on it. Like, I wasn't a one-man crew. There was two of us. And Brian, we both animated, but he was doing all of the music because he wrote original music for a THAC film, which is, pretty impressive. I have several THAC films with original music he wrote that night. But our ideas were just much too complex. And that's something we've always struggled with. We want to create a ridiculous film, but, it can be hard to make a 30-second film unless it's, Dane Cook being killed because there's already a formula.
But then when you did A Night at the Pier, the set was built beforehand, isn't that right?
Everything that I've done in THAC, the sets have been built beforehand. The sets in Subterranean were built beforehand.
I was just wondering, when Night at the Pier won first place, did anyone complain about that at the time?
There's always, I feel like there was somebody complaining about it, but I made sure before, because I've really wanted to create those worlds for a long time that you see in Beyond the 11th Dimension. It's kind of like the final reincarnation of me trying to accomplish that. And Night of the Pier was meant to be shot in black and white. Like, there's Mega Bloks that have weird colors that were used. And we knew I wouldn't, like, that's not against the rules to use Mega Bloks that are weird colors, but I think they're ugly. And I think most other brick filmers think that they're ugly.
I'm one of the few brick films that does sneak in Mega Bloks.
I use Mega Bloks in understructures all the time, but I try to avoid showing them to people.
Have you ever seen those grey, like, curvy bricks? That actually look really nice for, like, architectural design.
Yeah, those.
You see them a lot in early brick films, actually, like ones in the mid-2000s. Yeah.
Spastic Chihuahua, James Moore has strategically used Mega Bloks in a lot of his films as well, which I like a lot of James's stuff, and I don't like a lot of his stuff, but he's like really trying to get that kind of visual humor that I really enjoy out of brick films, Like, I think he's got some of the funniest one-off films, and he's got some of the biggest groans in Brick films. It's just like, are you serious? And then, oh man, this is genius. And I'm so glad he's trying all kinds of stuff, even when it doesn't work.
But Night at the Pier was actually one of the films that like taught me the most about animation, just from one small shot, because there's a part when a guy gets shot and his hat flies up. And when I saw that, I thought, the hat flying up looks really good, and I don't know why. And when I went through it frame by frame, the hat just immediately springs to the top of its arc and just hangs there for a little bit before coming down. And like at the time when I saw this, I thought it was just like really genius. I never would have thought of it on my own. And I kind of copied that in Horace and Horace's Day Out, when there's a top hat that flies up into the air, and it just in one frame immediately goes to the top. I learned a lot from that.
That's going back to like the bouncing ball, which I feel like I should do more bouncing ball animation tests myself. But you kind of learn a lot about, like, you want things to hang at the top because that's when it's moving the slowest. That's like when either gravity is starting up or finally, fighting off the thing. And so to get that energy to get up in the air, you have to be moving like at the fastest, at the bottom of the jump. So even if it takes a couple frames, those frames need to have huge spaces. And I feel like a lot of people they're in Brick films, they're so focused on, like, say, either ease-ins and ease-ins and outs. And sometimes you need to just bam, jump it up. I wish I could take credit for animating that shot, but I didn't actually animate that shot with a hat. It was Brian, which he's now working in video and not doing animation anymore. But he still likes animation a lot. But it was a lot of fun working. I worked with him for years on films, and I think we both learned a lot from each other.
I do think that discussion of animation and brick filming has kind of gotten bogged down by everyone mentioning ease in and ease out as like the be all end all. I feel like some brick films are getting to the point where it's becoming floaty, which floaty is a term you almost never hear for any kind of animation that's not CGI. Because CGI, it's really easy to get floaty animation. Because you just have the computer put too many keyframes in, and then it just takes forever and nothing has any weight. And I feel like sometimes they need to know when a shot needs less frames. And sometimes you want to instantly start. Like if you're jumping, which I think is why everyone could benefit from doing ball bouncing animations, like to get them looking right, you want it to, you want the ease ins and out at the top of the arc, but at the bottom of the arc where it's either taking off or coming down, those have huge spacing. And so like those transition like big and fast. And if they don't, you're like, why isn't this working? Like, why doesn't my ball look like it's bouncing? And it's because, gravity, it gets faster the further you go. And so you need to get faster at the bottom. And to overcome gravity, you need the most energy. And your energy is wearing off at the bottom of pushing off from that arc. And so, ease-ins and ease-outs are a good, beautiful thing, but it's not the only thing. Yeah, of course, everything has its place, but unfortunately it seems like people have gotten the impression that easing is the only thing worth doing for a while now.
Which, everyone could do themselves a favor and just go frame by frame through some Wile E. Coyote animation and see you can do things in like 4 frames and it's going to look great. And that's at 24.
A lot of it depends on what kind of film you're trying to do. Are you trying to do a film which is more in a kind of serious live action kind of style, or are you trying to make a cartoon? And if you want to make a cartoon, you can't do the easing in and out, everything being smooth. You need to be more springy and fast. One of the best examples, I think, is probably the what's it called? The Major Malfunction. I know you really like that one, Penta.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's basically the gold standard. I've probably said that before. But yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, all the stuff I do is cartoony, so the basis of most of my animation is that concept of like snapping and then hanging at the top of the arc.
But the thing is, cartoony animation is just kind of a caricature of real life. And, even if you have a realistic bouncing ball, it doesn't ease into the jump up. It still has to go fast, then slow at the top, and then go fast downwards. And so you can just kind of push it a little bit to the extreme. You might be able to do it in less frames in a cartoony thing, but it still needs to have that kind of snappiness if you're doing a realistic, like if do you guys remember my little Dane Cook film? Dane Cook gets crushed by a 1-ton weight.
Yeah,
I do.
I've
Yeah.
seen that.
Yeah. So I have a walk at the beginning, and I think it's a great example of a terrible walk cycle, because it's too floaty. There's too many frames, and I feel like people are trying to do animation like that when they have like a realistic thing, and it's not bad because the rest of my short is cartoony. It's bad because it doesn't feel like Dane Cook has any weight in his movement. And I think you need to look at that. And it's like, even if you're pushing for a realistic style, like you wouldn't want to walk like that, even though it's really smooth. Like I think it's a really smooth walk cycle, but it's like a not a very good walk cycle at all.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask is, because you've been working on this CG animation class, what is it like working with such a different form of animation, and how much has your experience in stop motion helped you go through the course?
I was able to skip the animation basics. So I'm not sure that I should have, because it would have been like more bouncing balls and simplified animation stuff. I skipped that course because I had enough experience that they looked at, some examples I did. They only wanted to see examples in CGI. Because also if you're transitioning from like stop motion or 2D animation, they want to know that you can use Maya because you're going to have to. It got me through like that first class. I got to skip it, but there's a lot of stuff that like I can transition back into my stop motion experience from the stuff I've learned in class, but there's a lot of stuff you can easily ignore when you're especially just working in with Lego figures. Like you have like 7 points of articulation. You don't have like hips and shoulders or feet. And so there's a lot of additional learning you have to do on that side of things. But once you do learn all of like, when you learn a fully complicated, fully articulated, humanoid figure, you can scale that back and apply those new things you've learned about like weight, and center of gravity to this little minifigure, which I think you can really see evidence if you like watch the Lego movie. Like I think almost everything done in the Lego movie, you could pretty close get it done in stop motion if you really wanted to. But you can see that they're not like, they don't have a background of just animating Lego figure. They're taking experience from, okay, how do I take what I know about animating like a full scale human to a scaled down, less articulated figure.
So, Penta, have you got any questions you want to ask before we head over to the Brickfilm showcase?
Well, I did, but I think I got them in earlier, all right. But yeah, I think we actually touched on that concept before when we were talking, when it was the episode when I was being interviewed, we touched on the concept of the Lego movie animation. Like, it's different to the way people make Brick films because they would have had different backgrounds approaching it as animators. Which,
that kind of goes back to the thing where I say, if you can get an opportunity, shoot some live action footage of something you want, like just a simple action. If it's like sitting in a chair, entering a room or something. I don't know if you saw, there's a clip from my chicken movie where the character, he pokes his head in and it's like this very cartoon style shot, and then he comes into the room and then he bounces like through the room and out the door. It's actually one of my favorite shots, but I shot and it's one of the most cartoony things I've ever shot, but I also shot live action reference to make that film or to make that shot. And I think it's really worth it. If you can think about how can I animate this in a way that I don't expect? And if you shoot live action footage, you'll think of things that you wouldn't necessarily think of if you're just approaching it. I have a minifigure, and the minifigure has these animation rules I have to follow, so you're just going to get ideas that you wouldn't get otherwise. I bet you there was people on the Lego movie who shot reference, like live action reference of them doing weird stuff that ended up in the movie, and you see that and you're like, wow, that looks genius. Why would somebody ever think to animate a Lego man like that? And maybe they looked at something that was not a Lego man and kind of tried to copy it with a little, so.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and I'd imagine not many people do that in brick filming at all.
I've never seen it proof that anybody has done it except for me, but I hope more people try it. It's really fun, even if it's just an exercise.
Okay, so I think we can head over to the BrickFilms showcase now. You okay with that, guys?
Yeah, that sounds good.
So my pick is Remake by Mirko Hortsmann. It's a German 2008 film about a man who receives inspiration from watching a silent era movie. The story is very sweet and a sort of sweet sort of love story of sorts, and just something I feel like everybody should watch, really. It came first place in the jury prize at the 2008 Steinway, and is regarded as a classic by a lot of people. But somehow, in recent years, it has kind of sort of gone into obscurity a little bit. And I was looking for like films, to pick for this episode of the podcast. And when I looked upon the view count, I was really surprised how low it was. So I kind of knew that I had to talk about this because it's a book film I pretty much loved from the very first time I saw it. Really, I really like it. I think the animation with the silent movie is really inspired. I think I saw a behind the scenes video, and you can see that he used early experimental motion picture work from the 1800s as a reference. And I find that just really interesting. And I think it's also just one of those films that has such a great score. The classical piece he used for the film really flows just perfectly with the pacing and what you're seeing. And it just feels like it was just like made for the film pretty much. And yeah, I just really love this film. It's great. What do you guys think of it then? I imagine that you've seen it quite a few times.
Yeah, I've kind of, I was saying to you that I sort of take it for granted. Like I hadn't even thought about how people nowadays wouldn't really know this film because I would have seen it way back when it won Steinway. But I really like the animation with the bricks on the surface. And I think there's a lot of good experimentation like that especially among German brick films for a while.
I was looking at the because I think I saw it years ago and I haven't thought about it since until you mentioned it, and so I rewatched it. And what it has in this 2D like the experimental animation, and it's got these like really great lines of action throughout the film, which you don't see a lot in brick films. Like Lego characters aren't super posable in like this really dynamic, but you get these really interesting arcs throughout the silent characters because they're just composed of individual parts kind of set on a table. And in normal animation, like bad animation has really boring like all the lines of the characters, they're straight up and down. Like you go watch Family Guy, everyone stands straight up and down, they move in this very like kind of robotic fashion, and it's just like, oh, I'm gonna there's no arcs. And if you go watch another thing like Samurai Jack or something, you see it's like everybody's standing, they're holding these arcs, and there's like every pose feels dynamic even if it's a still frame. And a lot of these poses that they have in the silent parts, they have these great lines running through them that just like it kind of draws your eyes across. It's like, oh, this guy's pointing his sword and his back is arched a little bit, and it just kind of points towards the next character coming from the other side of the screen. And it's it's really good in a way that you don't see a lot of Lego films that get good, strong examples of things like line of action. So I don't know. That was like the first thing I noticed rewatching it.
That's an interesting observation about the film that I wouldn't have thought about.
Well, it's something that's kind of been drilled into my head in these CG classes. So it's my perspective is always constantly shifting, I guess. So,
Penta, what is your pick?
I picked a film called The Afterlife Experience by Filmy Guy, which was an entry to a contest on Bricks in Motion in 2010 called the Avant-Garde Contest. And I was surprised when I was making the wiki page on the Avant-Garde Contest, I was surprised to see that this film didn't even make the top 10. And then it also has a low view count on YouTube, especially for a brick filmer who's well known. And it's less of a film that everybody would enjoy, but it's pretty experimental, I guess. You can see that he was, thinking about things while making it. It's got more thought put into some of the technical aspects than the other stuff he's making at the time. Not everything works in the film, especially some of the effects towards the end. But yeah, it was pretty interesting, and I was surprised that I've never heard it mentioned since.
Yeah, I do actually. I actually really liked it. I'd never really heard of it before, and it's really impressive. It does actually, story-wise, remind me quite a lot of the last year's summer contest winner, Quest for Life, but sort of quite a darker kind of version of that kind of story. And I really like the animation and the camera movement, especially. I think it flows really well, and it's really nicely paced. The only criticism is I think there are some special effects that do look very kind of, I don't know if they work quite that well, but when it's been done in 48 hours.
Yeah, I was going to mention it was made in a short amount of time, and but you mentioned the pacing, and that was one of the things I found interesting about it. Was there's that like extended breakfast scene at the start of the film, and I thought it was really unusual for a brick film, and I'm not sure if I like it or not, but it was definitely interesting.
Yeah, well, actually, I was looking at the comments, and that was like one of the criticisms that it got was that kind of extended morning scene, which doesn't really show you too much, really. I mean, I guess it kind of sets up the character, and he's just kind of having like a normal day. But yeah, it is kind of got a kind of slow pace at the start. But when the actual plot kind of sort of starts, it kind of, the pacing is pretty much perfect.
Well, I just found it unusual to see such a like sort of slice of life type of scene in a brick film, and it's nicely animated, at least, even if you don't like it.
Because there's some scenes in that slice of life that I really enjoy, where I was talking earlier about more animation can be snappy. And this is almost kind of like, that's a kind of realistically shot stuff. But I think he has like a lot of little fun things, like the way people sit down. And like he doesn't waste frames. It's like, boom, 4 frames or something for sitting down. And it's like this clean, snappy action that's more entertaining to watch than like if somebody tried to make a really smooth ease down into the chair, And there's like a lot of little animation like that in this film, where there's like a little motion it's not a very important motion, but like he adds a little bit of snap to it to make it more fun to watch. And I think you can see evidence of that all throughout the film. And, it's easier to look at like the action stuff. But, even in some of that early stuff, when he like gets up, it's just like there's shots and he's not wasting frames on smoothness, and it makes the film, or at least the animation side, better. Which is he working for Stupid Studios or
Stupid
whatever
Buddy.
Yeah, I feel like his experience with them, I'm not sure if he had started back then, because he works with Forest Fire, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and I know they started working with Stupid Brothers or whatever at some point. I'm not sure if he had moved on to that at that point or not, but I feel like it's kind of, there's evidence of that talent, why he was, you know, working with a studio like that, or stuff he's learned from that studio. It kind of shows up in the film in little ways.
Yeah, I feel like he's one of the best technical animators that we've seen, like top 5 ever from Brickfilming. So it's no surprise that he's gone on to professional animation studios.
Yeah, like there's just a lot of really good stuff, and a lot of it is just that little stuff. Because like there's a lot of, at the end, I would say, a lot of the problems that bother me at the end, it's like there's some bad effects, and that to me is less problematic. But I think going back to establishing shots, there's some stuff at the very end where it's just like the camera is so close to like him and the rock as he's trying to cover up this hole, that you kind of have to watch it a couple times to kind of visually understand what's going on, because it kind of gets lost in the shuffle visually. And it just needs like a few more wide shots, I feel like, to kind of establish the whole layout of this scene. Because like, where is this hole in the ground to where this rock is in the ground? And because it just like, it's like close up, you know, he's pushing a rock, you know, close up he comes out of a hole, and you know, it's just it's a little confusing because there's too many close-ups, I think. But you know, probably part of the problem with the time constraint is like, I can't build this set, so here we go, close-ups.
So, Chris, what did you pick?
A Quack in Time. So I really like A Quack in Time. I think I can't take Lego films very seriously. I know some people can, and I can take Lego films more seriously than people that aren't necessarily involved in the scene. But I don't think it lends itself well to that. It's, you know, probably pretty obvious in my own films, but you know, I want to see worlds, but I want to see ridiculous worlds. And I think that's something that A Quack in Time captures for me, is it's got this whole absurd logic to it that flows and works really well. It also has some pretty fun visual stuff that I think is really entertaining to me. Like, he'll approach different shots and it's like, okay, so we have our character, not Harrison Ford. I can't remember what the name was.
I think it was Harrison, yeah.
It was, yeah, Harrison, but they didn't say Harrison Ford. That's okay. But he like is leaving an elevator to check for guards, and then he like slithers out of the elevator like a snake. And it's just like the absurdity and the unexpectedness of that. It just makes me laugh. And I feel like you don't get a lot of that kind of unexpected comedy. And it's not a joke that was really like written. It's a joke that visually plays out. And I think that's just like and it looks like it was probably inspired by James Moore. I don't know how well that records, but just a lot of S's, which I think is a great film. I love it. It's one of my favorite Thack films ever made. But it's just like the visual comedy of a Lego character slithering around on the ground like a snake. And it just like happens. It's just like boom, instant guy on the ground, just slithers around, pops up. There's a lot of fun stuff like that in there that I really like.
I really like the comedy, the visual, and I just think the whole, just like, I think the writing as well is just really funny. I think that the whole idea of like just an evil duck and that kind of stuff, it just, when I watched it, I could definitely see why it would appeal to you, because like, I definitely kind of see a lot of stuff that you kind of like. And
yeah, I don't like I don't feel like you can really make an overbearing villain in Lego seem like totally evil. Like, you're not going to get somebody like Maleficent or something from Sleeping Beauty like to read the same way in Lego. Like, you can't kind of like, oh man, that person's really evil in this animation. Like, I can't be convinced by that. But like an evil duck, like this is like is just, you kind of blindside him with the comedy aspect, which is kind of exactly what I did in Beyond. I had an evil carp. So yeah. I guess I like evil animal themed villains. But yeah, I feel like on the writing side, a lot of the writing is really funny. but I feel like there's a little bit too much. Like I feel like you could cut down on some of the dialogue and just make it a little bit snappier. And that's my biggest complaint, which is a minor complaint because I think it's pretty fun, pretty engaging. But I feel like a lot of Brick films suffer from too much dialogue, because dialogue, I think, is really easy to animate usually, or it's animated in a very lazy style anyways, which is easy to do. And sometimes, like, some of the jokes don't work. Most of them do, which is good. But, sometimes I'm just like, I think it would have been stronger without than with. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Penta, but...
Yeah, I do agree that I wouldn't say every joke lands for me. I guess you could cut down some of the dialogue. And where the film is best is when it's moving and when there's a lot going on, more so than the dialogue, I'd say.
Yeah, because there's some really funny moments in the beginning when he meets him, and then it kind of drags a little bit there as well. And it's like that. There's a lot of funny stuff, like the whole. I want to say he's talking about how his cat's in his dishwasher and he needs to go, and it's like that's kind of a funny line. But I think the film might have been better if it was like the whole cat in the dishwasher thing was just cut out, because it would just help the scene move a lot faster. And it takes, like, there's some stuff and I think that's reasonably humorous. It's not like a completely failed joke, but I think sometimes even if it's only like moderately working, sometimes pacing is more important than quantity of jokes. So I don't know. Maybe the cat in the dishwasher was your favorite joke for both of you. So.
Well, actually, that was one of my least favorite, actually.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that look at that. I think that on paper that sounds really funny, but it just drags. Like at that point in the film, I feel like it's just kind of really dragging. And like you said, when the film is moving, it's at its best. And that's so true. So.
Yeah, I feel like the most memorable scene is the infiltration.
Yeah, because then you've got the jokes like the snake slither, which is really funny, and just like the various things. And, you can even get away with the password jokes, which aren't super funny, but it's important to the scene and it's helping it move forward. It's like, oh yeah, they don't have secure, if he had to crack passwords and stuff, that would be terrible. Just imagine if there was a 15-second hacking sequence in the middle of that. It would just ruin that entire thing.
Yeah. I kind of feel like we spent a lot of time talking about the flaws of the films we picked, so I think it would just be worth mentioning that we picked the films because we like them.
I do think I was... I think I mentioned that, but it was so brief. Although I feel like I said a lot of good things about life. Well, I guess everything I said that was positive was, there was always this negative. I would mention something good and then say something bad. But I do like these films. They're all very good.
Yeah, it was feeling a bit negative there. So I think it's worth just the reminder that these are good films, recommended.
No film is perfect, but you're always going to find these kind of flaws. But these films overall, they're all great. Yeah, I think. I really like all of them. Really, yeah.
Well, I think one of the things is now at my stage, because I've been doing this for a long time, and I get better by looking at stuff critically, which I think I've mentioned a few things I don't like about my own films, although maybe I wasn't as negative on my own films, but I'm looking at everything with a really critical eye after all these years. It's because how can I get better? Because there's really you could never stop getting better, and so sometimes.
I kind of feel the same way. I mean, in a big way, I do kind of feel like I can't enjoy a film in quite the same way if I can't find its flaws and talk about that a little bit. Because if I find a film that's perfect, I find it really hard to talk about, because what do I talk about? To say everything's great or I like to be able to watch all these different films and be able to pick up on certain flaws and stuff, and I can still appreciate those films, but I can go in more in depth and talk about them more, really, by being able to point out these things.
Yeah.
I suppose there is more to talk about there, yeah. But at the same time, we did, of course, talk about why we like the films.
So
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely would recommend checking out all of them if you haven't ever seen them. Which I feel like Quack and Time, yeah, I didn't get a lot of talk because I think we all talked about how little some of these films were seen. So, but not quite. I was super surprised that Remake has under 1,000 views. That's the lowest.
Yeah.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, it's really do that. Yeah, especially being a winner of Steinway and stuff. But when you look at the when it was uploaded, it said it was uploaded in 2012. So I don't know if it was a re-upload or if originally it wasn't uploaded or something.
Well, it would have been originally offered as a direct file download, I guess.
Yeah.
Probably.
Because even though it was during the YouTube era, Mirko was going back a few years, so he would still be offering the downloads, since that's the way he'd always been doing it since 04.
Well, I remember that's when I remember when YouTube appeared, and it was just, I hated it. I thought that everything uploaded on YouTube looked terrible. And so I was very resistant to upload my films to YouTube because it was not a very good platform at the time.
Yeah, I remember even into 2009 we were still offering direct file downloads and Vimeo uploads as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, if I was around during the kind of, the start of YouTube, I would kind of think to myself, like, do I really care? I just want to share them with the community. I don't really need to show it in this new platform. I would feel that way until you really see what it ends up being like, and I don't imagine. Yeah, I imagine a lot of people were like that.
Well, my YouTube is still kind of like, people don't see it because they discover my YouTube. Like I don't upload frequently enough to get like shown in search results or whatever, and so it's basically just still a sharing platform, and I almost may as well have a direct download at this point because so few people watch my videos apart from my lens video. People seem to really like that. So yeah, I know, because some people really have taken advantage of the platform, and it kind of shows. They get those big audiences. Like Mind Game, I want to say, was really successful along with Nathan Wells, like getting started on the platform and being in the right spot and being prolific enough to make it work for a while. So
yeah, I mean, I think we've pretty much like can sort of wrap up this episode now. I think we've managed to talk about a lot of good things. Yeah.
I think so. I think it's about the right time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you guys for being on the show with me. It's been great having you with me. You can find again. We'll probably be doing next episode in another couple of weeks. You can find me on social media at AW Studios, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and obviously YouTube as well. Penta, where can I find you?
Sillypenta on YouTube and Twitter, and of course, thanks for having me on again. And just let me know if you ever need me to fill in again. I'll be happy to do it.
Awesome. And Chris, where can I find you?
I am like at RobotsWKnives on Twitter, and that has a link to my YouTube, which is just I don't know what my YouTube is Robots with Knives, but it's difficult to find. Or you can just click the link on my Twitter about. It should say my website. So yeah, or no, it doesn't. I have to fix that. I am Robots with Knives on Twitter. I mean on YouTube somewhere, and it's Robots W Knives on Twitter. So
hopefully the link will be there by the time this episode goes up.
And one quick thing I wanted to point out before we wrap up. A couple of days ago, someone pointed out to me that the Star Wars: The Great Disturbance wasn't available on the BRICKFILM archive. Well, it was actually removed because of copyright. So Penta has actually uploaded it onto Vimeo, so it can now be seen.
Okay, I was wondering when Google was going to start enforcing copyright laws on like the sharing side of things.
Yeah, Google Drive. Yeah, I was hosting it in Google Drive, and I didn't know that they were going to start cracking down on copyright there.
Yeah. So hopefully you have them archived on hard drives, though, right?
Yeah, we've got multiple backups.
That's always good. Because there's definitely stuff that was only available on YouTube that I can't get anymore because audio was killed. That was like, oh, I liked that film and I liked that illegal music they used to make it. Yeah, well, it was a lot of fun to be on the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.